Hey, this is a short video about learning objectives. So first I want to look at the role of the educator, whether you're preceptor or facilitator, or clinical educator, whatever the name is. So really important these days is that effective learning is no longer established by the educator being in a didactic role, where the educator basically tells the learner or the student how things are, what to do, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So this is like the old-fashioned classroom style of teaching. There was an assumed middle or average of the cohort of learners, and then that was the target, and then some information was delivered, and then people needed to go home with that, and hopefully they'd learn something. So I put a big cross through that because that is not effective. So the role of the educator should be that kind of as a coach, as a support person. So what does that mean? Well, it means if there's a group of students or learners or grad nurses or novices, or maybe a single individual, that group or that individual is in charge of what to learn. So they decide, I want to learn about malignant hypothermia, I want to learn about anaphylaxis, I want to learn about the pain protocol, I want to learn about regional blocks, right? So they determine what they want to learn. They determine also and are in charge of how to think, right? So we're not going to say like, this is how you do it and this is how it is. They are in charge of how to think. So they need to come to their own personal understanding and creative thinking and applying concepts from the evidence base into practical application. So they're progressing at their own pace. Yeah, so they can't say like, shown you now once, do it once and you're good. No, they progress at their own pace. And it means like, one person might learn a pain protocol in the morning and another may need to take 2 weeks. It doesn't matter. They progress at their own pace. They're also engaging with educational resources when it suits them and when they are most alert. That's why a lot of the educational resources are now found online, so someone can decide, yeah, I feel fresh now, I'm going to have a listen to this 5-10 minute video and make my own notes and then come back in the clinical space. And then I'm going to learn how these concepts are supporting me, for example, in the role of being an educator coach rather than some kind of didactic teacher. All right. So let's have a look at my first sheet of learning objectives, where I will highlight 4 theories of learning. So the first one is called behaviorism, and behaviorism aims at a change in behavior. Now, what does that mean? Well, usually it refers to acquiring a new skill. I gave an example here, for example. It's the first time you're seeing the Airvo, which is from Fisher & Paykel, and it is a high-flow humidified air and oxygen equipment that delivers an air and oxygen mixture that is humidified through nasal bronchs to a patient's airways. So there's a simple step method of setting that up properly, and that's a very basic skill. But also you can see behaviorism as the initial stages of learning a new language, where you learn a few new words and a few new phrases, or learning how to drive a car, right? So it's very much motor skill based and simple, and it's assessed very simply. Once you can do the skill, it should be obvious. A level up is called cognitivism, which is the formation of mental behavior. And we're thinking here of things like rehearsals, a repetition of a skill, reviewing, and basically it teaches the learner to become learners themselves. So Say, for example, we've learned the skill of setting up an Airvo, and everyone knows if we don't do this regularly, we're going to forget it. So now, by having some kind of discipline of rehearsing, looking at the video once every while, putting your hand up when the equipment needs to be set up, so that you now form a mental behavior, a cognitism, a rationalization, so that for the rest of your life, if anyone asks you to set the Airvo, you go, oh yeah, this is what I do, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's ingrained in there, you've done it enough, and mentally, you know what to do. So, one level up from that is a theory called constructivism. All right. So this relates to lifelong learning by determining meaning. So the process that lies behind here, for example, is a group debrief, or also when we do projects, for example, quality improvement projects. So what we're doing here is we're looking at what our own way of thinking is. How can we do things differently? How can I do things maybe in a better way? So we're reflecting, we're reviewing, we're debriefing. We're doing a project where we take an inventory of what's going on, and maybe we can save wasting time, for example, is huge in nursing. And so this could be a really good project, how to do a routine activity differently so we can save a lot of time. Now, the last theory in pedagogy of learning is that of connectivism, and it relates to a creative process. And the creative process basically means you do something original, something new, something that comes from your own. And it relates to the ability to actuate, and basically you performing evidence-based clinical care, meaning that you've taken all the facts and the concepts, but now you're going to see how that means that you're going to do something in a new way, and enhance patient safety, for example. Cultural safe care is another good example. This is creative processing. All right, so that's our first list of learning objectives. Now we're going to make it a little bit more busier with lots of different aspects, but you will see they're all important. So I'll call this the pedagogy of the 21st century because that's what it's called in the academic literature. So if I look at learning here, I'll first go up to foundations of learning. So we're looking perhaps at academic degrees and even postgraduate degrees. We're looking at integrating foundation with interprofessional knowledge, and then of course we're looking at foundations, in our case from ACORN, NSCA, the NSQHS, APRA, and we have standards and national standards are law. We have guidelines and also position statements. All of those three build foundations, and as a coach we should support learners where to access this, how to access this, and bring these really generic, highly conceptual statements into practice in everyday periop nursing. Alright, so then we have the second aspect of learning, and that's the social factor. So I've got lots of different things, and it could be more, but there's a big spiritual aspect of it, cultural competence, life skills and well-being, for example, looking at sustainability, environmental safety, social networks, ethics, all influencing learning. And then this third big group, I call it application. So we're looking at creativity and innovation. So this is really high level of learning skills. Problem solving, clinical thinking, communication, collaboration, right? So applications, social factors, foundational standards, guidelines, positions, academic degrees, interprofessional knowledge, all integrate with learning. And we should coach our learners or students, graduate nurses, and so forth, how to integrate all this and how to coach them and support them. So finally, we have here the learning objectives according to Bloom's taxonomy. And it relates to performance growth in complexity. So the easiest thing to do is just to recall facts and basic concepts. So your learning objective terms that fall into that are define. The learner at the end of the session should be able to define or list or state. Yep, so it's very simple. Yeah. Can you list the 6 most commonly used opioid drugs? That can be a learning outcome. Yeah. So you go one step up, and now you need to be able to explain ideas or concepts. Usually the word is understand. So how are you going to assess that? Well, you ask the learner to be able to classify, describe, discuss, explain, identify, or select. So for example, one of my videos about hemodynamics and the blood pressure, I give an analogy between the preload, afterload, and contractility as it relates to a garden irrigation system. So that's my understanding, right? So I'm on level 2. So we're going one step up. And now we're looking at, is the learner to be able to use the information in new situations? Can he apply these concepts? So we're looking at learning objectives like implement. The learner at the end of the session should be able to implement blah, blah, blah. Solve blah, blah, blah. Or demonstrate or interpret. Yeah, should be able to interpret signs and symptoms, observations in the patient to determine what is the best drug to use to provide analgesia to the patient, right? So we're going one step further up, and that is to make connections amongst ideas. So we're looking at learning objectives like organize and compare, examine, test. So in the learning objectives, that's what the verbs are that's being used. The learner should be able to examine blah, blah, blah. The learner should be able to test, compare. Yep. Going one step further up, we're going into the domain of evaluations. So the learning objectives will be in a way the learner should be able to appraise theories of Bloom's taxonomy or critique Bloom's taxonomy, argue. Yeah, makes sense. And then the highest level, you have to be able to produce original work. So we call this the level of creation. So the learning objectives will be in the line of design, construct, develop, and author. Right? So I hope this overview was useful, and yeah, all the best with your coaching.